Three, two, one. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a real treat for you. His name is Jack Linehan, and he is the city administrator at City of Falcon Heights, Minnesota. Jack, say what's up to everybody.
Hey, how's it going, Joseph? Thanks for having me on. I'm excited. I've been hearing your podcast and seeing you on LinkedIn, so it's cool to see and be a part of it myself.
Sure thing, man. Sure thing. I guess since you've heard it before, you've seen it out there in the webosphere. Selfishly, like, what kind of topics do you think we should go into? Like, I should make standardized on the show.
One of the things I like about your podcast is that you're talking to a wide range of people, right? So it's not just public works directors, it's employees at all lines, it's salespeople. You've talked to people at APWA, and then some in city management too. So I like that you're talking to a wide range of people. I think that's pretty interesting.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man. Thank you. I don't have like a review sheet out there for people to give me a review, so that helps out. Helps out a lot. All right, so let's dive in a little bit about let's dive in about Jack here. First off, City of Falcon Heights. Give us a lay of the land. I went to college in South Dakota, so I know a little bit about Minnesota, but I've never heard of Falcon Heights. So give us a little lay of the land.
Yeah. So Falcon Heights, we're kind of a unique community. So we're right in the Twin Cities, in between St. Paul and Minnesota, or St. Paul and Minneapolis, obviously in Minnesota. And we're a small community of about 5,300 people, 3 square miles. And we're most notable for home of the Minnesota State Fair. So it's one of the largest state fairs in the country. It's right here in our borders. And we also have the University of Minnesota. They have 2 campuses. They have the Minneapolis campus and the St. Paul campus. I've been working on the rebranding for this for a bit. It should be called the Falcon Heights campus because it's in Falcon Heights, but we're also near St. Paul. So right in the Twin Cities, very neighborhood community.
Interesting. I like it. So let's get it. You've been in this industry for X amount of years. Tell the listeners, I guess, what attracted you to public works, what got you into the industry, and then also I want you to give a random Tuesday of what it looks like for Jack.
Yeah, thanks. So, I'm kind of unique in that I knew I wanted to work in local government when I was 16. That's when I made my decision I was going to do this. A local city administrator from my hometown came to a careers class I had in high school, and he kind of shared what he did in his everyday life and, shared kind of just the wide range of it. I thought that was pretty unique. So I planned out my career path at 16 that I would do that. And I, every now and then I'd like want to change majors and wasn't really sure fully what I wanted to do. But I did an internship for a county in my undergraduate and decided, okay, I like this a lot. So I studied public administration at Winona State University in Minnesota, and then went and got my master's at Northern Illinois in the Chicago area. And when I was there, I ended up working for an internship. I got hired by my internship, and I did 10 years in the Chicago area. So kind of climbing the ranks throughout municipalities. Did my last 7 years for Gurnee, Illinois, which is where Six Flags Great America is, right kind of between Milwaukee and Chicago. And then had my daughter during the pandemic. My wife and I were like, we really want to go back to Minnesota. And so we made the move back in 2022. So I've been here in Falcon Heights for just coming up on 2 years in May. So sometimes it feels like it's been 2 weeks, and sometimes it feels like it's been 10 years, but it's been a really fun journey here in Falcon Heights.
Gotcha. Sounds like you landed all the fun places, the Six Flags and also the Minnesota State Fair.
Yeah, I kind of have had a little bit of that in my career of kind of working with a large attraction nearby and what that brings. And from like a public works perspective is fascinating, right? Because it brings traffic, people, and it's not, your normal year-round traffic is so different. For us during the fair, Minnesota State Fair brings in about 1.8 to 2 million people for 12 days. So about 150,000 to 200,000 people a day during those 12 days. And so we're a town of 5,000.
yeah, you're a town of 5,000 and you get 100,000 in a day. Like,
Yep.
what do the bathrooms look like? What do the parking lots look like? What do the streets look like? Like, come on, give it to us.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a challenge because, the state fair, they're independent. So they are not part of the city. They are within the city, but they kind of have certain carve outs as a state property. Um, but we're neighbors. And so it impacts our residents parking, getting anywhere. Even for me, like going to lunch during the fair, forget it. So I bring a lunch and plan out my routes accordingly, even just driving around the city. So it's a big challenge doing trash cleanup for our public works every single day during the fair. And it's just because people, walk out, they have their cups, leave them there. So we do a lot during the fair. That's definitely our busiest 12 days of the year by far.
And what's kind of the ramp up? Like, you know it's going to start at a certain day. When do you start the prep for it? Is it like a month earlier? Is it a couple weeks earlier? Just to say, hey guys, it's happening again. It's coming. We got to ramp up the amount of people, ramp up, make sure everything's good to go, make sure all the trucks are washed so you can present well. Like, what's that ramp up period like, and how long does it take?
I mean, we're starting now. And so it goes end of August to Labor Day. So we're starting to kind of make preparations, start to think about it. Um, we have kind of a citizen task force that looks at the state fair and provides recommendations just on how to, improve resident quality of life during those 12 days. So we're getting that kicked off soon here. So yeah, it's a lot of work. But it's just kind of something that we do. It's something our residents are used to. So it kind of add some interest, I guess, to your year.
Yeah, yeah. And then talk us through a normal day for Jack. Like, what is when you get to work, in the time between you get there and you clock off, what are you doing all day? Give us a daily rundown of what it looks like for Jack.
Yeah, so it's pretty, I wish it was more typical sometimes, but it's really atypical. We have a really small staff here. So I have 10 FTEs for the whole city. Most of it's public work. So I have a public works director, 3 full-time public works maintenance workers, and then the rest is administrative staff, finance. So because it's so small, I like to call myself I'm a working administrator, and so that's not to take away from big cities. I mean, they're still working, but I joke, I'm like the dog catcher. There's a lot of catch-alls that kind of falls under my position to kind of help oversee. So some of it's that big picture, long-range thinking, strategic partnerships, capital planning. But a lot of it's just doing the daily work and just making sure that our city's beautiful and our residents, love living here. So
What's the determining factor when you're about to leave the house, putting on a regular shoe versus like a work boot? Like, do you know what you're gonna get into that day versus not?
yeah, that's a good question because it is every day. It's a little bit of like, what am I going to be doing today? Varies as I said, it's so day to day. Today I know it's in the office, got some meetings, meeting with the council member later to do our one-on-one all employee meeting this morning. So it does vary. In the summer, I end up spending a bit of time outside just looking at stuff, which I know that sounds very useful. But you get a call, right, about a property or a street or different work that we're doing, and it's good. I like to see it firsthand, right? So if I'm going to get a call complaining about something, I want to go look at it first, just so I can talk to them, talk to the employee, see, okay, what is it that they're concerned about? If it's tree, plow damage from the winter, whatever it is, I like to go and see it too. So I try to get out of the office as much as I can.
Sure, sure. Let's say you're mentoring a youngster and they ask you, Jack, what is one skill set I should pick up to be successful at what you're doing today? What would that one skill set be?
Yeah, I think one of the skill sets in city administration, and I think it goes throughout government, is a lot of times people really want government to be black and white, right? There's rules, it's very set, it's very standard. We can do this, we can't do that. One thing that I've kind of tried to push back and challenge a little bit is trying to live in that gray area, right? And so knowing that everything isn't always cut and dry, there's always extenuating circumstances and things you have to think about. So whether it's doing code enforcement or, working within our policies, I try to encourage our staff that we're a small community, right? We only have 10 employees, 5,000 residents. let's deliver awesome services to them. And so if sometimes it goes kind of outside of our, oh, we don't do this for this reason, why not? Let's look at it and see. Maybe it will help people's life be a little bit better. And, if we can do it, let's do it. And so try to see us as a resource and that people are, again, really proud to live in Falcon Heights and proud of the service they get from their small city.
Yeah, yeah. You said you had 10 full-time equivalent employees. That's not, I mean, compared to most public works departments, that's not that many. How would you say, or what would you say is your best practice in regards to outsourcing? Because there's not a lot you can do in-house with 10 operators, one being yourself. And like, how do you find the contractors to be able to do the work the right way and then make them, I guess, represent you guys when they're out in public well by doing the work that public works is deemed to do in the community?
Yeah, and that's a challenge, and that's exactly it. That's how we're able to operate with so few employees. Is we contract out most of our services, honestly. So whether it's fire, police, engineering, building inspecting, you name it, we contract it out. So the interesting part, though, is at Public Works, we do a lot of it in-house. We actually do contract. For example, we do plowing for our neighboring city, Lauderdale. They're even smaller than we are. We picked up their contract in 2022 when I was here to create additional opportunity for us. So in that example, Lauderdale, they were being plowed by the county. The county told them that they couldn't keep plowing them anymore, and so they came to us and they said, "Hey, would you be able to support us and plow us?" So I worked with the public works director at the time. We talked about it, looked at the maps, and said, this adds maybe 2 hours of plowing to our normal routes. We could cover it. The counterpoint then is that gave us enough funding to be able to take our part-time employee and make it a full-time employee. So then that allows that employee to be here throughout the summer, doing all the various stuff. So it was kind of a win-win for both cities. They get great plow service, we get additional revenue to keep another employee in-house. So that kind of is the first part. The second part is that contracting. We do use sewer companies if we need to, road construction. So we have good relationships, and just working those relationships is really important for a small city.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. It's story time. I need a story from Jack when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Yeah. So I thought about this one a bit because I was thinking, okay, what's something went wrong, public works related. So back in our city, what we do is because we're a small city, but we actually have great roads. We've been doing a really good job, and I can't take credit all for it. The city's been doing it for a long time. Every 2 years, we do a major capital road project. So we do them on odd years. So 21, 23. Next year's our big one, 25. When I started in 22, it was the spring of 22, and we were kind of cleaning up a little bit of a mess. In 21, the company that was the lowest bidder to do our road project for the summer, they went bankrupt partway through the project. They were near the end. They had finished most of it, luckily. Other cities, they had pavement ripped up and they just had to close shop. But for us, they had finished most of it, but they hadn't really done a lot of the restorations yet. And kind of near the end, without getting too into the weeds of it, literally, they cut some corners, and when they did the turf restoration, they planted. They're supposed to plant grass for the residents' boulevard area in the right of way. They used a ditch weed. We don't know why. We don't know how, but they planted
Interesting.
weeds instead of grass.
Okay. Probably
So
cheaper.
I think it was cheaper. I don't know why it was, but all of a sudden these residents had, instead of grass growing, they had these weeds that were just monsters, right? So like 5 foot tall weeds at the edge. So it was kind of a disaster. They were very unhappy that spring. And we're in court. We're honestly, that's why I'm not gonna get too into it. We're still figuring this out through the courts. It's gonna take years to get this all settled. But we knew that, the residents can't wait multiple years to have their lawns looking how they want to look. So we ended up working with the city council. We brought in a new landscape contractor to go out there, and we knew that it would potentially never get recovered, right? We'd just lose those funds, but it was the right thing to do, to make sure the residents could have trust in the government and our projects. So we went out and we fixed all the lawns. Then Last year, we had another contractor come in to do our 23 project. And overall, it went really well. And kind of when I talked earlier about going out, once a week, I made sure I went out for about an hour and I walked the entire construction project just all the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I shouldn't be out there walking, but I wanted to see it. I wanted to be front line, make sure everything's working well. Well, about August, the contractor planted the grass, and all of a sudden it was really hot out. A bunch of weeds popped up, and we were really sensitive to that. That was the one thing we didn't want to have happen. Um,
Yeah.
so we worked with the contractor. They got it addressed. I'm actually gonna go out now. We had a really warm weekend here in Minnesota, at least for Minnesota. It was 70s. So I'm gonna go check it out probably later this afternoon and make sure that more weeds didn't pop up over the winter. But it's been looking good. So that's been a project that we've been, very proud of how the work went last year, and uh, hoping we don't have another weed gate like we did back in 21.
Weed gate. Actually, another question around the weed gate. Communication with the community, because I'm sure you've probably got plenty of calls. Hey, this grass looks terrible. What's going on? What are you guys doing? And you don't want to just say, well, the contractor we hired, did a terrible job, because it's on you, even though you did outsource it to somebody. So what's kind of I would say your verbiage or your thought process on making sure the customer, this community member know that A, you're handling it, and B, that it wasn't really us, but we screwed it up even though it was a contractor, but like we're gonna make it right. Like, how does that go?
That's exactly what goes through our head, right? It's so easy to kind of point fingers. It's not our problem. They were the lowest bidder. That's the law. But in reality, yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that it looks good. We want to make sure our residents are heard. They care about their properties, and we want them to care about their properties. And it looks bad if we don't, too. So for us, communication has been really key. I kind of my background as I was, kind of climbing through the ranks, I ended up doing a lot of communication throughout my time, overseeing city communications is always kind of part of my skill set. So I take it really, really carefully that I know that the importance of communication and making sure people are heard, that it's two-way, that they have a way to reach out to us is so key. So we kind of worked with residents the whole time to, again, make sure that they were heard, make sure we were meeting their goals.
And is it like a Facebook message you're putting out? Is it like a town hall meeting at a local community center? Like, what's the most efficient way for a town of 5,300 for you to get the word out and say, hey, relax, we're figuring this out?
All of the above. So what we'll do is we'll put out information for all of that. So, if it's big enough, we'll put it out on social media, make sure that, residents can see it that way. We do a weekly newsletter. But honestly, it's one of the best ways to get in touch with people too, is we'll do direct mail. So we'll send them a letter directly, just letting them know what's going on, keep them in the loop. There's obviously some costs and time and postage. But for something that's going to be really critical, it's a good way to get in front of them and have them at least have direct communication from the city as to what's going on.
Gotcha. How does Jack continue to progress throughout his career? Like, what's your personal and professional development regimen like? Every year you get better and better. How do you stay intentional in doing that?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I'm really trying to do and trying to grow a lot is my leadership. Kind of that's been a part, in the city, we're a small city, small staff. And so, kind of taking that position and that role very seriously, that I'm, a leader for our organization, and trying to build my skill set for that, and knowing that it's not something that you can just say, okay, I accomplished, I'm a good enough leader. I want to continue to grow in that. So I'm in a leadership cohort with other city administrators throughout the area, really kind of trying to read more too, and reading more leadership books, and trying to build my skill set there, because that's an area that I just want to grow more. And I know that, I look back at myself that maybe it was a big moment or, a disaster or something that I think, man, I could have handled that a little bit better. And so I think I'll always feel that way. Doesn't matter if I'm, starting out in my career, if I'm later on. And so I want to continue just to kind of find ways to do that better. So that's kind of, I think, the path I'm on.
Sure, sure. And how does Jack? I mean, you and I both kind of have the same haircut. How do you let your hair down, man? Like, what's Jack do to kind of step away from the, the daily grind? Step away from the 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 administrator role of the city and making sure everything's running right. Like, what are some of your hobbies? How do you step away from it? How do you mentally, relieve yourself and then be able to come back stronger for it?
Yeah. I'm newly bald, so this is a new look for me. I ended up.
What
I
kind of
got this.
response you get?
It was a little shocking. I know, like the first day I walked in, it was like, whoa. But yeah, I was losing a lot of hair. This has been a tough year for me. Just professionally, everything. So it finally caught up to me. It was always in my cards. I looked at my grandparents that were both bald in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
20s. And I thought, okay, that's where
Same
I'm
here.
going. And I held on to it for a long time. I'm in my 30s now, and I
There
was
you
like, all right,
go.
it's time to go. So, but beyond my own personal hair routine, yeah, just I like to spend time, with my family. I know it's a cliche. I got a daughter who's about to turn 4 in June, and just giving her the childhood that she deserves is always such a key part too, and that work-life balance. And I make sure the employees feel that too. One of the challenges of Falcon Heights, we're right in the Twin Cities, and our pay is not what other cities near us are paying. And we lose employees a lot. They'll go to a nearby city for a 20% pay increase for the same job. And so that's always a struggle. It's something that the city, we're a good training grounds. We always joke that it's like a minor league baseball team. Um, but the counterpoint is what we try to do is make it a great time when they're here. So give them a ton of career growth opportunities, and also have a really good, family friendly environment. That if your kids, you need to bring a kid in for a couple hours to work on some stuff, you need to work from home for a little bit, you need to take off early for a doctor's appointment. We're very flexible with that. It's not, you never felt, you never left feeling bad that you have to take time for your family, because we make it very clear that that's, a priority for all of us, from me to the council to every employee. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, I've heard of that concept before about you said a kind of a feeder city where you hire them, you get them into the industry, you get them their CDL, get them their level 1 or whatever, and then they take the skill set and go down the road and make some more money with it. What has been your best practice to kind of capture some of that? Because you know how it is. An employee doesn't really start to pay off maybe after 18 months, 2 years. They start to, after all the, the initial onboarding. So how do you capture that, and how do you make sure they're trained up as fast as possible so they can start to, pay you, from the work that they're doing versus you just getting them trained and they can take off?
yeah, that's been a big challenge for us. I mean, we've lost a lot of really good employees, over time. And I think that there was a period for the city where the turnover was really rough, right when I started. I mean, we have 10 employees. I've been here 2 years, and I'm probably fourth on seniority list, fifth on seniority list if you ranked us. So most of my team is pretty new. Our public works employees tend to stay for a long time. So we have a really stable public works department. My director retired last April, and we ended up promoting his replacement in-house. So that was really good for continuity, giving kind of that growth opportunity for a really good employee. Our director now, he's a fantastic public works director. So what we try to do though is just build again opportunities for them to learn, to kind of give back to the city, and I always let them know too. It's like, hey, if you, do want to find outside employment, use me as a reference. I'm never going to hold it against you. If you're looking to grow your career, I'll help you with it as much as we can. Because, that's one of the things too. We go into the interviews knowing we're trying to hire the most talented people. And so if we lose them after a year, 2 years, it's a bummer. I'd love to try to keep them. And we work on, working on compensation now to try to keep people, compensated fairly, but also understanding that we can get a lot of benefit in a short amount of time. So just making sure that they're ready to come in, contribute, and hopefully they like the atmosphere and want to stay.
Sure, sure. What would you say is the biggest misconception about your position? Let's say I asked your wife, like, what does Jack do all day, every day? What's his value in the community? What would she get totally wrong in answer that question?
Yeah, it's funny. My wife actually works in the field, so she
Oh,
ends up knowing a lot more about what. So we were both assistants back in Illinois, and she's now manages communication for a nearby city. So she knows a bit about what I do. She's kind of my one of my mentors, basically, is kind of in house that I can kind of run things by her.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things you don't really realize, I think, with this position is they say it's a lonely position, and it is kind of lonely. I'm very friendly with all of our staff. I like spending time with them, but I'm also realistic. I'm not friends, with employees. We're here for a business, here for a job. Sometimes I'm a fun boss. Sometimes I don't, I can't be a fun boss. Um, on the counterpart, I have 5 supervisors at the city council. So that can be a big challenge is when you get told by a city council member, we have to do this. Absolutely, you have to get this out. You have to do this. And then you have 4 others who are saying, I don't think we should. And how do you balance that? And that's a really tough part about the role. It's why there's a bit of turnover in the city administrator world. Um, and it's a big challenge. It's one I'm figuring out as I go. But I think it's one that I don't know if all employees always see that kind of that pressure of having council members, texting you over the weekend, calling you, and trying to balance that with, what or what the city's trying to do for their, majority of the mission. So that's always, I think, a big
Yeah.
challenge in the role.
Yeah, you're kind of stepping into it. Like the city administrator role is so interesting because you're kind of in the middle of things. I mean, one of your roles is to, I guess, inform, educate the council, and then also you have to make sure everything's going right, with fire, PD, public works, all the different departments within the city that are, I wouldn't say under you, but that you have a hand on. And then it sounds like that could be a squeeze, to where you have a lot of responsibility, but not that much power, which is tough, you know. So yeah, I'm learning more about the city administrator role, which it sounds a little interesting at times.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's always the challenge with it is, you have kind of that exactly as you said, it's the squeeze of, trying to balance, operationally, trying to be, an advocate for your employees who you care about, want to make sure that they're successful. But at the same time, too, understanding that we're in government. And so, the elected officials, who I work very well with, but just that, at the end of the day, their direction is the direction of the city. And sometimes you might disagree or provide recommendations that, they see it differently, and that's okay. That's kind of part of it. So definitely a challenge. And, um, again, one I wish I could say I was a master of, but I think it's just going to be a lifelong learning experience to figure that out.
Sure, sure. All right, let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Falcon Heights. What ask of your community would you want to put on this billboard?
Yeah, I thought about this one a bit, and I thought, I want to do a rotating billboard with maybe 4 different public works messages. So
Dude,
um,
4, not 1, not 2.
I couldn't narrow it down to one. One of which is 20 miles an hour means 20 miles an hour. So we did a couple of years ago, we passed an ordinance that our streets are 20 miles an hour for all city streets, unless it's like a major thoroughfare. Um, I don't know if you've ever gone 20 miles an hour in a car. Your car doesn't want to go 20 miles an hour. It wants to go 25 or 30. So,
Yeah,
but we have very narrow city streets, street parking, and so our public works employees are out there just making sure they're safe. So people following speed limits, like the number one. The second one I had is don't rake your leaves in the street. We do street sweeping. We're doing that right now. Our public works are out street sweeping all the streets. People, most people are good about it. Some people see it as a free way to just like rake your leaves in the street and the street sweeper will pick it up. Well, that clogs their street sweeper and causes a bit of a pain. So that's one I think that I put out there. Another one is flushable wipes aren't flushable. So that's
yeah,
a key one. We had a blockage last summer from somebody flushing flushable wipes. And you
yeah.
can do as much as you can for your system for sanitary sewer, but if people are flushing wipes, doesn't matter how nice your system is, they're going to block it. And that's what happens. So, and the final one is give plow space. So, we do a lot of plowing here in Minnesota. And so I have great plow drivers, but they find sometimes people just don't know how to drive around plows. So that's one of our concerns, one of our challenges is just give them space to work and they'll be able to get their job done.
Gotcha. So 4 rotating billboard. I like it. I like it. All right.
Soon
I
enough.
always like
Yeah.
to leave a space on the show. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors you had along your journey. And then also, I want you to give a word of inspiration and motivation to your fellow city administrator counterparts across the country.
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier, but I mean, truly, my wife is my greatest mentor. It's really a blessing to have somebody, when you talk at night, um, that you can kind of share some of the problems and get their perspective. My wife was an HR director and she was a consultant in HR for a while. So she's really good at, knowing some of the things that I don't always about some of the human resource components of, management. So she's been a great mentor for me. I worked in a couple cities, and so I've worked for some really good city administrators that I pick up a little bit of each one of their mannerisms, their approach to leadership, and I find all the time I think back to them. So I'll just quick say my shout out to my Lockport supervisors. I have Tim Schloniger, he's in Algonquin, Frank Kaler, Ben Benson. So those are all the Lockport ones. Then I worked for Pat Mutz in Gurnee for 7 years, and I picked up a ton from Pat. Biggest thing I've learned from him is how to be patient. And I'm an impatient person. I like a project or something, we're going to do it now. I'm putting quarter 1, we're going to get it done. And then I end up getting into it. And I find that by quarter 4, I underestimated the public process, or I underestimated the red tape, or how long it would take for the state to get back to us, or different parts like that. And he was just always, he thought about things in 10, 20, 50-year increments because we're government. The city of Falcon Heights is going to be here in 100 years from now, likely, unless we really screw it up. So, it's just the nature of it. And so thinking long term is so important. So that's one of my, I guess that's kind of my motivation that I'm looking towards too, is trying to think that way, that we're stewards of our cities and we're just temporary. I'll be a footnote sometime in 100 years from now in Falcon Heights history. But it's important to kind of see that stewardship and just know, what you're adding to it every single day. So that's something I would, encourage others to think about.
Gotcha. All right. Let's say I'm coming to Falcon Heights and I text you ahead of time. I say, hey, Jack, where can I go to get the best burger in Falcon Heights? Where are you going to send me?
Yeah. So that, luckily it's not super challenging for that because we we don't have a huge commercial area. We're 5,000 residents just kind of packed into in a very small neighborhood area. But we have a couple good restaurants here. Best for a burger is Stouts. So it's right in Falcon Heights. Really good burgers right by the state fair. So I encourage people, if you're coming to the Minnesota State Fair, which it should be on everybody's bucket list. It
Really?
sounds like every state fair, but it's Minnesota takes a ton of pride in our state fair. So if you come to the state fair and somehow you leave still hungry, which is impossible, go to Stouts, get a burger.
Okay. Stouts it is. I've heard of the state fair. I heard it was a big deal, but now you're kind of enticing me on it. So, all
Yeah,
right.
it's a
Uh,
Minnesota tradition.
all right, Jack. Thank you for hopping on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Jack, any final words before we get out of here?
No, I want to thank you for having me on the podcast. As I said, I kind of have been following, seeing what you've been doing for it. Really cool things. I mean, it's cool to bring people in, hear their stories. I hope I can just kind of add a little bit of the city administrator perspective too, just so, people can kind of see our world and see how we can work with public works as well, because it's a key part of what cities do. And one of the critical services we offer is public works. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this. I'm happy to be a part.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Well, Jack, this has been the Public Works Podcast. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.